Perfectionism begets paralysis. How do you get out of the cycle? In 2013, I read a book by a philosopher named William James who gives an answer, not necessarily the answer, but an answer in the form of a philosophy called pragmatism. Before we get to his solution, I think it's worth naming a couple of types of paralysis, specifically creative, interpersonal, ethical, and logistical, or like logistical optimization paralysis. Creative paralysis occurs when your vision for what you want to create is beyond your ability or skill to create. You will probably recognize the Ira Glass interview influence in that statement. If you haven't heard of the Ira Glass interview on creativity, you should go ahead and listen to it on YouTube. It's real good. Summary is that you often get into the process of creativity because you have really good taste, but in the initial stages of trying to create things, your taste is below your level of skill, and you often give up. His solution to this problem is to just create a ton of work, to just practice, to get a bunch of stuff out there, because if you don't do that, then you can't get feedback, and feedback is what you need to do to increase your skill, to close the gap between your skill and your vision. If this sounds familiar, it's because we talked about it already when we covered the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. You probably understand logistical optimization paralysis without me having to explain it. I would refer you to, honestly, like my most viral video ever, where we discussed the procrastinating robot on Mars as described by the algorithms to live by people, Christian and Griffiths. If you want more details in this, you can see them in the chapter about optimal stopping and scheduling. You can't see that at all. For the sake of defining it for this video, though, logistical optimization paralysis is the process of attempting to find the most efficient way to do a thing, and trying so hard to find the most efficient way to do a thing that you never start. A couple of ways out of this kind of paralysis. One is the kill task, random task, order assign, order do. I made a whole YouTube video about it after the video went viral. Shameless plug. Another one I call the hourly wage hack. I often find myself in a Best Buy or a Micro Center, like thinking for more than 45 minutes about whether or not to buy something that costs like $7 or $8. And this is absurd. Admittedly, this is not always the best option, especially for people with impulse control problems, like people with super ADD, but I find it occasionally useful when I'm getting stuck in a quagmire of decision paralysis to actually do the calculation. This is what the hourly rate on this project is, and I've already spent 45 minutes trying to decide. I therefore have like 12 more minutes to make the decision before I'm literally losing money trying to make up my mind. Occasionally, a necessary strategy is to relax the constraints of a problem. You can read more about it in the books that I'm mentioning, but certain classes of problems are not solvable in polynomial time. Human lifetimes are not long enough to solve certain problems, and the only way to get at them is to guesstimate a little bit, to make a couple of simplifying assumptions, to do the spherical chickens in a vacuum, if you're familiar with the joke. I'm self-conscious that I'm coming off elitist by dropping all this jargon without explaining it. The essence of the spherical chickens in a vacuum joke is that certain problems are just too hard to solve without simplifying assumptions. It's like when you're doing physics, you start without friction, you start without air resistance, you start in one dimension instead of 3 dimensions. If you're paying attention to too many variables at the same time, you will break your brain. Relaxing your constraints can mean not trying to optimize for every single variable at the same time, which you often cannot computationally do. Cool. Finally, before we move on to the other ones, is this idea that decisions beget decisions. It's sort of related. Just put a stake in the ground, do one thing. The video is going to be 3 minutes. The video is going to be this. The essay is going to be 500 words. I'm starting with this paragraph. If you just pick one thing and then let the other things unfold as a result of it, that can be better than trying to constantly have everything be a function of itself, which will lead to a combinatorial explosion. I have less expertise with solving interpersonal paralysis problems, but since this video is taking on a computational vibe, I want to give you 2 ways, just 2 ridiculously different ways of solving this. One of the premises of interpersonal paralysis is that you are not sure how another person is going to react. There is a humility in thinking computationally about your brain's computational abilities and someone else's brain's computational abilities. Bluntly put, if you have, this is a ridiculous analogy, but you have 5 gigabytes in your brain and they have 5 gigabytes in their brain, you can't fit all 5 of their gigabytes in your 5 gigabytes. You have no computational capacity to fully simulate another person's mind in your mind. You can't fully predict what someone is going to do in reaction to what you're gonna do. So like, don't have epistemic hubris and believe that you have the predictive power to fully simulate someone else's brain. My heater has turned on and I'm relaxing the constraints in order to complete the video. Ethical paralysis is an impossible to solve problem. Part of what pragmatism is about is recognizing that we have to make choices despite the fact that we cannot make the perfect choice. I have a master's degree in applied ethics, and there are just a million different ways to go about solving problems. There's pluralism, there's utilitarianism, deontology, prioritarianism. Today, we're focusing on pragmatism, specifically a smidge of a bit of an essay called The Will to Believe by a guy called William James, an American pragmatist. 3 words: living, forced, and momentous. The video's almost over. This refers to a choice that you have to make. If it's a big decision, it's a momentous option. If it's forced, you're required to decide. If someone proposes to you in marriage, you have to make a decision in a reasonable amount of time. And is it living? Living options mean, is it actually a choice that's really available to you? In high school, I had a huge crush on Kirsten Dunst because of the Spider-Man movies. Should I marry Kirsten Dunst is not a living option. It's not a choice that's actually available to me. So the pragmatist reasoning doesn't apply to questions like that. If you have to make an important decision, if that decision is a real decision, and if you have to make that decision quickly, the pragmatist, or at least William James in the essay The Will to Believe, says that you get to go on vibes. He actually says faith. He says faith. You can take a leap of faith in these circumstances. You can what's up danger it and just not really all the way knowing that what you're doing is right, do the best that you can, and consult the inner core of yourself or whatever higher authority you happen to believe in. You can disagree with the pragmatists if you want. Certainly many people do. But at least to some people, and at least in some ethical systems, it is philosophically legitimate to consult your own values in times of uncertainty. I've never made a vertical video this long. Please let me know in comments if this is something that you're interested in seeing more of, or if I should just stick to my 3-minute videos conclusions. Never before in human history have we been so interconnected. Democracy, as we know it, is falling apart at the seams in front of our very eyes in the midst of a climate crisis that has led to droughts and orange skies, in the midst of discrimination in healthcare leading to disproportionate, unethical outcomes for minorities. There appears to be a loneliness epidemic that is leading to lost lives, while there is also an epidemic of mass incarceration that has left the United States with more prisoners than China. And also, oh, by the way, AI is coming and it might be taking all of our jobs and or reinventing war. Meanwhile, as you are aware, Russia continues its invasion of Ukraine, while, as you are aware, United States funding is enabling the bombing of civilians and the G word that I can't say without TikTok suppressing it and Instagram not showing it to you, happening in the Middle East. And all of these things are in your pocket, being beamed into your eyeballs, demanding attention. How do we avoid paralysis? My only North Star right now is these words: do what it is you're good at. Dr. Benjamin says that her primary plot is the classroom, and she remembers the moment when it dawned on her. But if you don't know what you're good at, try a lot of things and do a lot of work and wait for feedback, because the decisions that you make beget decision. It is computationally impossible to optimize for all of these problems at the same time. It is inhuman to expect that of yourself. You must relax the constraints. That isn't a blank check to not pick any problems, but it might be the necessary prerequisite for you to avoid paralysis, because all of these options are momentous and all of them are being forced on us. So find the ones that are living to you. Find the place where you can have an impact. That might be the only way to avoid creative, logistical, ethical, and interpersonal paralysis.